Hello everyone, welcome to the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. Today we're taking a look at another Vox Pop from Politics Joe. This time they're asking people in Robert Jenrick's constituency, who, as far as I'm concerned, is the only chance the Tories have as leader to not be completely obliterated. But anyway, they're asking his constituents why they voted for him or why they may not have voted for him. So let's just get right into it.
I was actually interviewed by someone from the Times newspaper before the election, and I said to them, if Labour gets in, there'll be riots in the streets. And within a week, there was riots in the streets.
I mean, even I'm willing to give Labour a little bit of a pass on that. It's not a lot they can do within 1 month to stop 14 years of Tory disappointment on immigration, but to be fair, they're also not improving it, so this guy's probably still right.
He's Tory, middle of the road image, isn't he, really? Which is what matters in these days of, wokeism and populism and all the rest of the isms.
I mean, I said at the beginning that Jenrick's probably the only chance Tories have to stop total obliteration next election, but that's mainly because of his stance on immigration. He seems serious about bringing it down to at least below 50,000 or something like that, which is still quite high, but a lot more serious than the others are taking it. But on other issues, net zero especially is the one where I'm confused. He understands that net zero is a bit mad, but in interviews will still say, oh, but it's a good thing, we still need to get net zero. And I suppose this is where this boomer's right. He is quite middle of the road still, but to some people still very far right, because his opinions on immigration are still to the left of the mid-noughties. But it's also an attitude of boomers that I'm noticing, myself included, a lot of younger people are getting fed up with. A lot of younger people, especially on, well, both the left and right, are getting fed up with this whole facade of centrism. Mental communists are always going to be mental, but we're at a point where we're seeing universities drop the name Anglo-Saxon because it implies that actually there are native English people. We've seen more murders at the Notting Hill Carnival than we saw in the riots at the start of last month. And then when it comes to dealing with any of it, once again, it's people on the right, it's native Englishmen, it's white men, whatever group you want to call it. People are noticing that we do not live under an equal system in terms of laws, policy, and the rest of it. And some boomers do understand that, but they want people that want to deal with these issues with a light touch. And while we had that for 14 years, people are fed up with it, but frankly, boomers are just happy to get that pension. It's something that I'm quite shocked that my parents are within that camp of as well. My dad was actually considering voting reform though, so at least there's that. But these are the type of boomers that laud people who are on benefits, and they really don't like it when I point out that actually the pension's a state benefit. Oh, we paid national insurance all our lives. Yes, well, that went to the pensions of your parents, I'm afraid. Now I'm paying for your pension, and I'm not going to get one. And that's rubbing me and a lot of other people up the wrong way, we'll say.
He, in my opinion, doesn't really understand what people need in his local area, but that doesn't mean he doesn't understand what the country needs as a whole.
That's more than likely true. I think most MPs run off the idea that they're an MP to represent the country, not particularly the constituency. However, since Jenrick is running for leader, it kind of makes sense that he needs to understand the country more than his actual constituency, which I think his constituency, as this guy seems to be implying, it's a fine thing to understand what the country needs, especially if you're a leader.
What do you make of Robert Jenrick?
By British MP standards, I suppose he's all right, really, which is a very low standard, having said that.
I think the dynamics of that particular question I find interesting as well. In Ed's mind, he's thinking, oh, he's going for a bar for all MPs, he must be mainly talking about Tory MPs, whereas the guy's probably actually talking about Labour MPs who, as far as I care, when they're calling for Ticketmaster to be nationalised because Oasis are charging extortionate amounts for some of their tickets, and Ed Miliband's only just written a letter to the Treasury saying we probably need to think about how we're going to get to net zero or decarbonise the economy by 2030. Yeah, the standards are pretty low on that end, but that's not how Ed understands it. Because, frankly, a lot of these alt media platforms are just mouthpieces for the Labour Party, and especially for the left wing of the Labour Party, which is madness.
To be honest, I don't have an opinion at all with the Conservative Party at the moment because I think they're in such a mess. I don't think it really matters who the leader is. it just seems in complete disarray to me.
I would assume that this guy is a Reform voter, and to be honest with you, before the election, I'd probably be looking at the leadership contest of the Tories quite closely. This time round, I have a passing interest because I have not seen anything from any of the leaders that gives me confidence that they are going to actually reinvigorate a right-wing vote. I think that they once again are going to try and get that boomer pension vote, try and nail that down, and then forget that actually the rest of the country needs to pay for that, which again is why I have joined Reform. It seems like the only chance we have. If only there was someone in the Conservatives who'd made me feel like there was a chance. But there isn't one, not even with Jenrick. And I'm alright with Jenrick.
I voted Tory most of my life and been a Tory councillor for quite a considerable few years. And I just think it's just a bit of a mess at the moment, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to get out of it.
Yeah, this is the type of Tory member I keep citing every now and then as actually the party has members that are actually quite based. And it's the unfortunate thing, but a lot of, especially base Tory members, understand that they can't really say quiet parts out loud. I effectively think this guy wants to say, they're way too left-wing, I'm joining Reform, because they actually understand the issues better, but he's having to put it in a way where basically his job's not at risk, because there are people out there that genuinely think that Reform is effectively a Nazi party, and they might be your boss. You never know.
Did you vote for him in the last election?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Were you happy? Was that a vote for Robert Jenrick, or was that a vote for the Conservative government, would you say?
Both, I would say, yeah.
What did you like about the Conservative government?
I imagine this is where he starts saying they're not Labour.
It's not, I know everybody's complaining, but you know it's like trying to run your own house and your own finances. You imagine a government trying to run the whole country. They're bound to have issues and things going wrong. And
He's definitely working his way to saying, I don't think Labour are going to be that good, therefore I voted Tory. Which if I voted Tory, that definitely would have been my cope for it, but I ended up voting Reform, so you can't blame me for this mess.
So, and obviously I'll have a lot of people disagree with me, but our main people in Newark, I think the voices that are most heard in Newark are the older generation and, you know, more middle-aged people and whatnot, which makes sense if it's the majority of our population in Newark.
Well, that and younger generations tend not to vote, which has been something that's been quite well known in party politics for quite some time. That is why pretty much everything in politics is just given to boomers and middle-aged people, because, yeah, younger people don't vote. And those that do are young and moronic, and all they'll vote for is, can I have free stuff? Which they did this time around with Labour, and, well, the answer is only if you're in a union. Which nobody is happy about. Well, except the union members.
But I'd say there's quite a lot of people our age, if not younger, maybe a little bit older in Newark, and, you know, I never hear them have a say in what's going on in our area.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially thinking back to when I was younger, they probably didn't care. Most people at the age of 18 to 25 don't particularly care. I remember the Brexit vote going on at uni and most people saying that they don't really care, but then they'd have certain politically active friends that were basically pushing them into voting Remain. And that's probably how Labour get most of their votes from the young, to be honest, just by peer pressure. But especially after this election and what they've done so far, that is definitely going to be a very uncool thing to do. So this is probably why you're seeing a bit of a resurgence of reform in the younger generations. Anyway, we're back onto the older guy talking about the riots from the start of the video.
And within a week, there was riots in the streets.
It wasn't in protest of the Labour government, though, was it?
Well, yes and no, but I think there'll be a lot more riots yet.
That's just said so casually. I mean, I agree with him, but I'm a bit more worried about it because I can only see it escalating. I mean, I'm not being funny, but it does feel like the news has been almost a machine gun of news stories about people being stabbed in Britain. You know, 2 or 3 murders, was it, at Notting Hill Carnival? Can't remember. I saw 3 stories alone today in the Times about murders just around Britain. Stories of prisoners being released has raised anxieties as well, I know that. This is only going to cause chaos. As soon as news comes out that someone released from prison has committed crimes again, which they basically will do, because some of these murderers who have gone to prison, they have something like 23 previous criminal convictions, and I don't know at what point we say you are never coming out of jail. And that's without getting into the debate of, the other thing that makes sure they can't commit crime again. But people are seeing all this, and, you can probably blame the Tories in maybe the first 6 months. But it's been 2 months, and already people are tired of hearing them say the Tories, because none of their lies about their own policy causing failure is sticking when they try and blame the Tories. It's just not happening.
Is that your prediction, as the Nostradamus of Newark?
Yeah. All the things they're going to do. Us poor old pensioners, we'll just have to wait and see.
That is a man who is really trying to steer off topic of immigration because it thinks it's going to get too uncomfortable, but really is saying, well, they're not going to make immigration any better. They're basically pro-crime. How's that not going to cause riots? But, as I say, quite hard to have that conversation with a leftist, and he can't really be bothered from the looks of it.
How do you think the government are getting on at the moment, the new Labour government?
I think they're crap.
Now that, my friends, is a voice of the people. I wouldn't be shocked if the Labour government is more unpopular than Liz Truss's government come 6 months of their time in power, because I am seeing basically nobody say anything positive about this government. Even when I asked my brother, who was very happy that the Tories were finally out, I asked him, well, what do you actually like about Starmer? And effectively the answer's always, well, he got the Tories out. Which, I mean, bear in mind, is 10 years older than me. If you're 35 and your main reasoning for your vote is get the other people out, it does kind of pay heed to my idea of maybe everyone shouldn't vote. No offence, I know my brother's friends watch this. Tell him no offence.
We've had a series of really dreadful prime ministers. We had Boris Johnson, who was a disaster.
I think Boris gets more flack than he deserves. I don't think he was, the best prime minister we've ever had or something like that. I think he was given an awful roll of the dice with COVID and tried to fight a system that was unwinnable, and then just started making really poor decisions, like getting rid of the team that got him elected in the first place, who wanted to deliver the things that they said they'd deliver. If COVID didn't happen, I think the face of politics in this country, and the country in general at the moment, would be completely different. But COVID hit, and what are you supposed to do?
The lettuce woman.
I give a lot of leeway to normies on their view on Liz Truss. So much propaganda was thrown against her that no, she was fine. It wasn't the mini budget that crashed the economy. Look at my other videos to find out. People don't like her, fine. Just have her somewhere in the cabinet, put her in the background. I don't care, she is useful.
The Hindu guy, millionaire. Now we've got a millionaire human rights lawyer.
I can't tell if this guy is left-wing or just old. But I do find it quite interesting that he didn't call Boris Johnson a millionaire, even though he is. But I also find it funny that he just doesn't mention Theresa May, who I'd argue is probably the worst out of all the Tory prime ministers that we've seen post-Brexit. But as I say, he's right, especially ever since COVID. The governments have just been disaster after disaster, managing to keep things perfectly stagnant so that we can keep this scheme of getting pensioners paid on board, while I work for a third of the salary I could be getting in America.
Who, frankly, doesn't seem to grasp the plot. Nobody sort of consults the people about anything.
I don't know what he means by that, because we have an election every 5 years, and in fact we've had more rapid-fire elections in the past decade than I think we ever have before. Certainly in living memory, but this is why I think this guy might actually be on the left-wing side of things, because he's using, frankly, an awful lot of language that's derived from the left. I mean, if this guy voted Tory, I would be very surprised.
So he's obviously a common market man. He's talking to the Germans and the French, which is the last thing this country wanted. We voted to be out of the common market. He wants to go in. No,
maybe he's just a relatively politically engaged normie. This guy's a bit of an enigma. He is correct, though. An awful lot of the stigma around Brexit is, we want to be looking a bit more outside of Europe, and we don't want to risk falling back into it. And as this guy says, a lot of people are worried that Starmer's going to basically ignore that.
I think he's got everything wrong, and his team are appalling. I'm thinking of Ed Miliband. Yes, one of the dreadful Miliband's. Yes,
I mean, it's something that I'm probably going to be making a video on at some point, but effectively, Ed Miliband's whole shtick is to decarbonise the economy in 6 years. Well, a lot close to 5 years at this point. And just last week, as I say, he wrote a letter to, I can't remember who it was in government, to the Treasurer, I think, effectively saying, okay, we actually need a plan for this now. When once again, Labour kept saying that they fully costed all their plans, and then it turned out there was a 22 billion black hole that was totally all the Tories' fault, even though an awful lot of it was down to Labour policy.
Sort of Jewish Marxist antecedents. His brother was all right, but Ed Miliband's terrible.
I have literally no idea what he's talking about there. Everyone seems to agree David Miliband's better than Ed Miliband. I imagine he can eat a bacon sandwich better. But I'm not sure what he meant by Jewish Marxist antecedents, whatever he said. I have literally no idea what he meant. And Ed doesn't ask him.
The women, I mean, words fail me, frankly. They're just, weirdos, really.
I don't know about weirdos. I don't think that's the word I'd use to describe them. Completely useless and out of their depth is probably a lot closer to reality. Lisa Nandy going into the culture department and saying the culture wars are over. You can now wear those things that caused the culture war, the rainbow lanyards, and then basically everything else has been a culture war, like only blaming the far right for the riots, say, and having clear two-tier policing that, when asked about it, really annoys the Met Police Chief Commissioner. It's total nonsense. Angela Rayner's just been sidelined basically the whole time. The only thing I've actually seen her in the news post getting into office is that she's on holiday in Ibiza, which nobody cares about, but everyone's saying, oh my god, people are criticising her for being in Ibiza. And I've not seen a single person say that, by the way. I've not seen anyone say that. Culture wars are over and they're making up a complete nonsense about right-wingers hating the fact that Angela Rayner's on holiday. It's just not true. And Rachel Reeves just keeps getting caught out on lies about the finances of the country. Literally every time she opens her mouth, it seems that there's something in almost every newspaper saying, yeah, this actually isn't quite true. And so, as I say, weirdos isn't quite the right word for it. Incompetent buffoons would probably be a lot more apt.
I think when you look at what's happening with the government right now, it was bad before. I mean, it's probably even worse now under Labour. I think it was kind of, when it came to the election, it was, which of the two bad people do you pick kind of thing.
Well, that was certainly a more boomer view on the world, because they have only ever known Conservative and Tory. They've been the only two not even relatively, just successful parties in the United Kingdom. But this is the thing, it's what's making me think the clown decade's actually a real thing and that things will get better. Younger generations are fed up with both parties. The radical left, which Tories have kind of dug their own graves for, but they've dug the grave for Labour as well. Because Labour have come in, understood, we can't just spend all we want on everything, because we kept having to go at Liz Truss and we're going to crash the economy if we keep spending like Liz Truss did and that we wanted implemented. Which again, that's just the going narrative. That is not what happened, but we're talking about the narrative here. But the problem is they can't say that to their voters, because a lot of their voters listen to absolutely mental economists who say things like you don't actually have money in the bank because fiat currency, and that balancing a budget's absolutely pointless because you can just, print money and then just tax it off the inflation. But they don't do anything to even try and make that point. They just say, oh, it was the Tories. Well, you can't do that for 5 years. 3 years, as I keep saying. So yeah, it all sucks, and everyone agrees. And I don't think Labour are getting into power again for a while.
Because, as you can see with what's happened so far, it's not been great. It wasn't great under Conservatives. And, you shouldn't have people that are choosing over eating or heating, in my opinion. I don't think it's right.
Yes, well, unfortunately, we have the OBR, and they don't let us change anything about the way the economy of the UK works, because effectively, the way the UK economy works is everyone needs to buy a house, and then they can borrow money to spend. And the equity tied up in their house allows them to borrow as much as they like. And trying to change the economy from a housing market with an NHS attached, it just doesn't seem to work. And, well, I mean, this is why all Labour can seem to do is say, oh, we'll just put higher taxes on capital gains tax and inheritance tax, and actually means test the winter fuel allowance, which I'm not even against. I think means testing, that's fine. It's just quite funny that they do that while at the same time Labour politicians for years have been claiming money to heat their second homes.
You see, Labour haven't done a good job. They've had less than 2 months to do anything. They're still dealing with the Conservative government hangover. So do you think it's fair to say that they've not done a good job so far?
I don't think they've done a good job so far, but again, you've got to kind of gauge them over the next 2 or 3 years. I think the start they've had has not been great. I think Keir Starmer is creating a massive divide within the UK people. He is coming across in a way that I don't really like. He doesn't seem to be thinking about the people that need their help. He's thinking about the people that doesn't necessarily need help.
I just find it funny that Politics Joe have effectively been saying, yeah, Labour have done all these stupid things that we don't like. But then when it comes to these Vox Pops and they see a Tory, they just instantly go on the defence mode. This is why I just call these alt-media left-wing nonsense YouTube channels, magazines, whatever, Labour mouthpieces, because they just are. They'll criticise them every now and then when they're in the middle of their 5-hour-long podcasts or whatever, but when it comes to actually talking to other people who don't agree with their left-wing ideas and policies, instantly it's just, no, Labour good, I've got to defend Labour. And it's not unfair to say, yes, they just got in, but at the same time, when you've also been for 2 months saying Labour have been pretty woeful, then it just comes off as disingenuous.
Is there anything specific that makes you say that?
I just think he's kind of, the whole way he has treated the immigration problem hasn't been great. I think as a country we can see we are basically creaking under the weight of immigration. Immigration for our country is hugely important. It enriches our country as a whole, but at the same time we can't dilute our resources to bring people in. If it affects the people that already live here, I don't think it's really fair to have them be the victims in this case, which I think is the case. You try and get a doctor's appointment now, you try and get an appointment at the dentist. It's ridiculously hard. The Australian immigration policy, in my opinion, is one that we should shadow.
These exact arguments are why the immigration debate don't really work. You can't really argue against immigration purely in economic terms. Overall, immigration does help an economy. In specific areas, it really doesn't help and actually makes it worse, which I can completely understand. But the thing is that really overall it's probably improved the UK economy a small amount, not that much. We'd hardly be impoverished without immigration, especially the last 10 years of it. And it is quite annoying. This guy's clearly right-wing. Don't concede that it enriches our culture. It is not necessarily true. Am I happy that we have fish and chips brought over by Jewish refugees in the 19th century? Yeah, sure. Did they cause problems in terms of murder and other crimes? No, not particularly. If there are people coming over via the immigration system, doesn't matter whether it's legal or illegal, though obviously illegal people should be sent straight back just to France. Doesn't matter where else, but France is fine. They can deal with the problem that they've been offloading onto us. But naturally, you should be selective with immigration. You know, people don't have a problem with Norwegians coming over, so they should probably be higher up, say, than, let's say, the Poles, who ended up creating Polish gangs in certain cities throughout the UK. But no, it's got to be this broad, sweeping, oh, no, all immigration enriches us. Not really. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say immigration does not necessarily enrich us. Immigration can be a bad thing. The scale we have had immigration these days is woeful and needs to stop. As this guy is saying, but he knows he's talking to a leftist. He starts saying things like this, he'll be clipped all over the place and be fired. Because cancel culture unfortunately works.
The thing that's actually on everybody's mind, I think, is actually immigration. And we can't keep taking all these people. We're farmers, so in actual fact, there's a lot less land. A lot more is going to be built on.
Oh no, it's a NIMBY. It was quite funny. I met some internet friends over the weekend. We ended up in the Midlands, and John, who I imagine most people who follow my channel closely will know, quite the arch enemy in terms of the YIMBY-NIMBY debate, but even he was saying he can understand my perspective, because I come from the north, and not an awful lot of that farmland really gets built upon, not to the urban sprawl that you'll see around London. And you can kind of understand why I typically dismiss people saying, oh, it's all being concreted over, because it really doesn't look like that in the north and, well, the Midlands apparently. It especially doesn't look like that in Wales. And Newark's actually in the East Midlands, so I imagine it's one of these places that actually isn't seeing this urban sprawl that we see everywhere else. I mean, said that it's near Nottingham, so maybe you see a bit of it, but I'm sceptical.
We need all these houses, they say, so why?
It's a thing I just wish most NIMBYs would say, because it's so hard to argue against. What? We don't want these houses built because they're likely to go to foreigners, even if they buy it legitimately. We simply don't want that. That's fine to say. If houses were being built and, over 90% of them we knew were going to be brought or go to, native English people, their countrymen, whatever, we wouldn't have this problem. But you see numbers like 1 million immigrants come in a year, and then houses are being built everywhere. People are just putting two and two together. And then you look at the social housing situation in London, and, social housing is going to foreigners. And people know that if they're going to foreigners in London, they're probably going to foreigners outside of London as well. And people just don't want that, but they find it very hard to say, especially to leftist interviewers like Ed here, because he does ring off those soy boy vibes, I'm afraid.
We just can't take any more, I don't think, but that's just my opinion.
Again, you always have to add this, that's just my opinion. It's one of those, please don't call me racist type things you put at the end, which... yeah, I can't expect anyone to not be worried about being called racist. It can get you fired, for God's sake. But it's something in the culture we have to subside. It's not helping anyone. It basically gives leftists the excuse to say, you don't have convictions in what you're saying. Effectively, we need to be men with chests when it comes to the immigration debate.
I mean, everything is so grim. People are depressed, people are ill, nothing works. Everything is breaking down, the health service, the courts, the police, you name it. So he couldn't do much worse, really.
Oh, but they're trying their best, aren't they, sir?
He's only been in government for less than 2 months. I wouldn't ascribe that to him.
2 months, is it as long as that? Heavens.
I mean, the point underneath that sarcastic comment is true. I mean, okay, at what point can we start ascribing blame to Labour? Again, Politics Joe have been fine criticising Labour for things they've done, and then when people point out Labour have done this, that and the other and not helped this, that and the other, it says, yeah, but think about the Tories, though. It's not washing after 2 months. I can't wait to see what it looks like when they're trying to do it in 3 years.
I just think, his problem is shades of sort of Big Brother and Animal Farm in the background there, the unions and all the... pseudo-Marxist and Trotskyist stuff. So, he's not going to be able to escape from the plot anyway because they'll hold him down to it.
I mean, there is certainly... everyone's getting the sense that there is going to be some backstabbing going on while Labour is in government. The way that Starmer keeps going insanely unpopular as time goes on, it might be sooner than we think. The honeymoon period's well and truly over. I mean... bear in mind, this will have been recorded a couple of days ago. Well, maybe more than that. In fact, no, the video was out 2 days ago, so they'll have recorded it probably a day or two before that. And I'm not being funny, but the odd look I had at the news over the weekend didn't improve things either. As I say, Ed Miliband's asking the Treasury, can we have a plan on how to actually decarbonise the economy and energy sector? There was at least a murder a day every time I looked. Hell, as I say, when I was away for the weekend, was talking to a few guys in a pub who... were effectively saying all the same things that we were. Just everyone, it seems everyone in the country can see that Labour is making things worse. Politics Joe have noticed that, but my God, they see any right-wingers, they have to say, oh, don't you want to think that it's the Tories' fault, though? It's got boring after 2 months of that. As I say, imagine after 3 years.
I do worry about the influence that the unions have over the Labour Party. They'll all want rises. I think they'll be, where's the money coming from? Unless it comes from taxes which will probably, will have to pay.
That's something that, because my parents lived through the 70s, they are very, very distrustful of unions, and after seeing that within the first couple of weeks of Labour, it's pretty much most of their worst fears come true, because it's not that paying the unions more, paying public sector workers more is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, in some cases, they probably deserve a raise. The problem comes in that it was just a unilateral, we're just going to give you everything you want and get nothing in return, and then they call that a deal, and then what instantly happens? Every other union says, oh, I want a bit of that actually, and it's just going to spiral. And already, as I say, this was part of the 22 billion black hole that was apparently the Tories' problem. Tories caused the 22 billion black hole, 9.4 billion of which was actually this Labour policy of pay the unions and get nothing in return. And everyone can just see through it. And even left-wingers I know are thinking, I don't actually know how they're going to pay for that. They like the idea of union pay rises. They don't like the idea of, actually, I don't know how it's going to be paid for. So people seem to be noticing that, actually, this is all pretty bad.
I did see this morning as headlines in the paper that one of the taxes they're going to put on would possibly be on fuel. Extra taxes on fuel. I think we're all going to have to pay for it, aren't we?
I mean, the fuel thing is going to be mad because living in Wales, public transport here isn't great. Every train station's about 20 miles away from each other. Buses ain't good. I'm not paying for a taxi. Yeah, having a car's basically a lifeline. Having added costs to that because Welsh Labour are really bad at getting public transport together generally isn't seen as particularly fair. And then on top of that, there's inheritance tax, which everyone seems to hate. Capital gains tax people don't really understand because that really does only affect billionaires mainly, but, well, they all go. And then your tax receipts drop. And then you're in an even worse deficit. And I am not looking forward to the people that have to deal with that.
So I think, and actually as for getting rid of the laws that actually Margaret Thatcher brought in, and then David Cameron increased a little bit as against actually what strength that the unions have, what they can actually do to hold the country to ransom, really.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher smashing the unions was definitely one of the best things that she ever did. It's worth bearing in mind as well that to actually be a candidate for Labour, you have to have joined a union. Effectively, unions are just an arm of the Labour Party, and frankly, the Tories were probably right just to completely smash them up. There's no good reason to have public sector unions. All they ever are a purely Labour political force, who end up again having these socialist types in saying we want socialism for everyone, while again the leaders of these unions are living it up in mansions and owning Jaguars and things like that. It's all a Ponzi scheme, which, if anything else, is the reason alone for getting rid of them.
What did you vote for him at the last election?
I did, yes.
What is it you like about him?
Well, I suppose he's one of the younger ones, and he was a knife and fork and all the rest of it.
I like him because he's one of the younger ones, slightly more on the ball with all these things and not an idiot. That is the baseline we have for good Tory MPs these days.
You guys voted the last election?
We did, yes.
Who did you vote for?
Labour.
Yeah, Labour as well, yeah.
Oh, God, I hate the youth.
Why did you vote Labour?
Just don't agree with Reform or Conservative, so I thought, well, they're the next biggest one, so I'll vote for Labour.
As I say, I hate the other side of the aisle here, which is effectively centrist and centre-right. Therefore, I'm just going to vote Labour without really thinking about it much more than that. And this is why I don't want everyone to vote, because you end up with ridiculous incentives. If you've ended up in a system where most people are voting for their parties, and the polls have shown this, by the way, you are voting for a particular party because you're trying to keep the other party out of power, you have ended up with a system that just isn't working. There's nothing positive about the system. It's just, I want the least negative one. How is that the basis for a successful government and society? Your leaders are just literally the not worst of a bad bunch. And even my brother accepts this, but, these types of people just don't want an alternative to universal suffrage or they want an alternative to the parliamentary system because they want first past the post gone, but we didn't have these problems in the 18th century, 19th century. Well, not even in the 18th century, actually. You had incredibly successful people doing what they could to improve the country. You didn't need all the working, even pretty much any of the working class voting in the 19th century for William Gladstone to be hailed as the people's William, because his budget was effectively absolute tax and duty slashing, free market, laissez-faire, wages risingism, I guess you could call it. And working class people who couldn't even vote absolutely loved him. I just don't believe these people need to vote to get what they want. In fact, ironically, since they've had their vote, they've effectively voted in for things that just can't happen. You can't have an NHS forever. We traded our technological advances in jet engines and things like that after World War II to America so that they'd give us money, which we then just put straight into a welfare system. And ever since universal suffrage, it's been about empowering that welfare system, even with Tories and pensioners. It's a welfare system. It's just not sustainable.
You're not one of Robert Jenrick's constituents,
No.
but your husband is a member of the Conservative Party.
That's right.
What is your opinion of Robert Jenrick, would you say?
I think he, even though I say he's not our MP, I think he's been a very good MP for Newark, the Newark area, while ever he's been there, so, to be honest, yeah.
I imagine Ed's going to ask, what do you mean? I imagine she's not going to have a very good answer. It's perfectly fine to say, I think he is good for the country. You don't need to give this constituency cope, especially if you don't know about it because you're not from there. But you can say, no, I think he'd be a good leader because of his opinions on immigration and X, Y, Z that you do know about.
Why do you say that?
Because I think he has Newark's...
Yeah, she doesn't know what to say. I'm just skipping this bit. Pointless.
Did you vote at the last election?
No.
Why didn't you vote?
No, good question.
They all suck. It's okay to say they all suck. It's fine.
I don't vote because I don't think I know enough about politics to make my mark.
Yeah, don't worry, that's about 90% of the country, but unfortunately most of them still vote anyway, just because they can.
Really?
Absolutely.
But everyone should vote, or everyone has the opportunity to vote.
Have you seriously never heard this perspective before? I know a fair few people that don't vote because they just don't know enough about it. Like, they say that, or I don't know what X, Y, Z or policy is. And these people are typically slightly higher IQ than midwits. Like, this is your average midwit response. It's like, but you can vote, why wouldn't you? It's perfectly reasonable not to vote if you don't feel like you've put in the work to actually vote. I mean, this is the problem with votes being effectively free. They become effectively valueless to where, as we can see, Ed is saying, oh, but you can vote. It's free. You don't bother putting any of the work in to understand what you're voting for. You can just vote, just do it. Obviously, Ed would say, just vote Labour, it's fine, or maybe Greens, it's fine. But no, it seems that these people have a little more understanding about the world, Ed.
There's a reason you've got it.
Yeah, for that reason, because I don't really have an interest in politics. I'm honest, you know, and I trust that whoever gets in does a good job.
I mean, even Ed's implication there, by the way, is that, people fought and died for the right to vote, which, by the way, that's not even true. Effectively, the reason the government allowed for universal suffrage after World War I is because it was such an unmitigated disaster of human life. Many, many people died in World War I effectively because of the relatively complex geopolitics at the time. We have a whole series on the Worcester Club about all this. In fact, I'm going to put together all the informative clips of that into a video for when I'm away in a couple of weeks, so you've got an extra long video of British foreign policy to look forward to. But yeah, effectively everyone got the vote because everyone's lives were completely upended. Some villages completely lost all men that they had, and you know, it was kind of okay, this was pretty major, we'll now all give you the right to vote. Which made a lot of people happy, but having the right to vote doesn't mean you need to necessarily exercise it. And again, not earning it and having no stake in it, well, people have taken advantage of it, haven't they? And this lady isn't taking advantage of it, which I can only respect. People who say, I'm not voting because I don't feel like I understand politics enough, I respect them more than I respect Ed Campbell here, because Ed doesn't understand politics particularly well, and yet will still act like he's an authority on it.
If Robert Jenrick was watching this, was listening to you right now, what would you say to him?
I would say that I trust him to do his thing.
This is by far the best woman that they've interviewed ever on these Vox Pops. Literally being interviewed about politics, she keeps saying, I don't really understand politics. And I just love the question of, what would you tell a politician? Do your job well? Yeah, I'd love it if all politicians did their job well. I am completely on board with you on that.
Do you think Robert Jenrick should be the next leader of the Conservative Party?
I think he should, yeah. I mean, as my own personal opinion aside, I think Robert Jenrick probably has got qualities that the Conservative Party need. He, in my opinion, doesn't really understand what people need in his local area, but that doesn't mean he doesn't understand what the country needs as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable place to land on. I mean, things that are good for the country as a whole anyway, they will be good for the local community, but to be honest with you, a lot of people don't seem to understand that your local representatives in Parliament, they are kind of supposed to worry about the country as a whole. If you're worried about your local area, you have this thing called the council that you're supposed to contact, and you actually vote people in for, by the way.
It's quite incongruous if you can't get to grips with what people here need. Obviously, the UK is a much larger area.
It is. I think the way to look at it with Robert Jenrick is does he understand what the country needs if he doesn't understand what his local constituents need? I think that's a big problem for the people who will potentially vote for Robert Jenrick. But when I look at the other candidates he's up against, I think he would be a clear favourite to win any vote in regards to leadership.
Did you vote for him at the election?
I didn't. I always vote for the Green Party.
Wait a minute, what?
I didn't. I always vote for the Green Party.
Oh my god, I am going to commit self-forever sleep with the British electorate. This guy was coming out with all these right-wing opinions, these right-wing things saying, yeah, Robert Jenrick, he understands the country, yeah, immigration, yeah, the British, he seems to understand what the British people want, Starmer doesn't. Did you vote for the Tories? No, I voted Green. What? What the I don't swear in these videos anymore, but I'm very close to just having a 5-minute rant, effectively ending each sentence with WTF. This is the thing you need to understand about the British electorate. You can talk about policy all you want, but it's all down to vibes. Effectively, I've seen the most effective way to change people's minds on these things is literally go to a doorstep, bring up an issue that the person on the doorstep it says that they have. Let's say, I didn't like Boris Johnson and how he went to those COVID lockdown parties, whatever. It doesn't matter how true or not it is. It's vibes based. That's the narrative they're going with. You say, oh yeah, I agree with that. I'm Green Party, by the way. Let's have a whinge about Boris Johnson for 10 minutes. And effectively you've got a Green Party supporter for life there. I've seen it happen in plenty of ways. I would not be shocked if it happened to this guy. I can't find any other reason he'd vote for the Green Party. I don't think he knows any of his policies. I think if after that you don't understand my perspective of not everyone should vote, I don't know what else to do for you. This man is a turkey voting for Christmas. All of his opinions. Yeah, he seems like a, con reform voter, something like that. I assume he either voted reform or conservative. No, right at the end, curveball. Now I always vote Green. And the country's in a mess. And he's voting for a worse mess. Just take me back to the Victorian period. Things were so much simpler back then. Either you were involved in politics and quite good at it, or you could just go about your daily life and not worry about it. I'd love to be in that camp, but I'm not allowed to be, because everything had to be political. I don't think there's anything else I can say on this. That's just gobsmacked me. I'm just going to leave it to linger in your mind for the rest of the day, I suppose. So with that, yeah, show's over. Tosh Newscast returns tomorrow. Obviously, we'll be going through the news with all sorts of things I've not gone through today or over the past week, including, I imagine, many murders. Regional variations, as far as I'm concerned, it's still TBD, but after the 100th Laughing at the Guardian, I was given enough super chats and support to have to play a terrible game called Dustborn. Here's a screenshot of me downloading the game as we speak. So Wednesday evening, I am going to be playing that, I imagine, from 9 o'clock, something like that. And we're going to see just how bad this unironically woke game is. And then I'm away this weekend, so I won't be able to make it to John's stream on the Worcester Club about our Parliament, but go over to the Worcester Club, join us there, join the Discord, subscribe, whatever. And videos will be out as and when I can make them. So, as I say, once again, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.